Dengue fever is on the rise around the world, but the once tropical disease is now appearing more and more often in Europe. The mosquito that carries it has spread northwards due to the hotter, wetter weather caused by climate change. The insects are now present in 13 European countries, including France, Germany and Greece. Evangelos Sipsas reports from Athens.
Temperatures are rising in southern Europe, creating favorable conditions for tourism and holidays, but also for mosquitoes. Reports of dengue fever are increasing in the region, with experts linking the local outbreak to an invasive mosquito species.
WHO has assessed the risk of dengue as high globally, which what it means is that it requires the maximal attention and response from all levels of the organization to support countries around the world, controlling the current dengue outbreaks, and also preparing for the countries to respond to the upcoming dengue season.
Typically found in the tropical and subtropical regions of Southeast Asia and Africa, the species commonly known as the tiger mosquito is believed to be behind the rise of dengue fever in Europe. Scientists attribute its increased presence in Europe to climate change.
Usually, Europe reports imported cases from the Americas, from the Western Pacific, from the endemic regions. But this year, we saw limited clusters of autochthonous transmission. As we know, the summers are getting warmer, and there are two main vectors of this virus. One is Aedes albopictus, which is widely distributed in Europe.
According to the European Center for Disease Control and Prevention, fewer than 80 cases of dengue fever were reported from 2010 to 2021. However, more than 130 cases were reported last year alone, and scientists fear that the number could increase further this year. Dengue can be difficult to detect, with the most common symptoms being a fever that typically appears 3 to 14 days after exposure. This outbreak is causing significant concerns for Italy, Spain, and Greece during the tourism season. The European Center for Disease Control and Prevention says that the outbreak in Europe is limited and does not pose a threat to travelers. However, visitors should take precautions and avoid exposures to a disease that doesn't seem to be going away. Evangelos Sipsas for CGTN, Athens.
Well, let's speak now to Dr. Bharat Pankania, who's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. So, dengue fever, my understanding is it can crop up in southern European nations, particularly with the warmer weather. But are we seeing this tiger mosquito actually thriving in areas that it never has before?
Well, with the mosquitoes being able to overwinter in southern Europe, in other words, survive the cold or not so cold winters anymore, then we have a problem. And by the way, there are these two main types of mosquitoes. One is Aedes aegypti, which doesn't really like the cold and doesn't do so well. On the other hand, this tiger mosquito that you said, Aedes albopictus, that is widespread. Now, if that mosquito also becomes a good source for transmitting dengue fever, then we have got a big problem. So at the moment, Aedes aegypti, that is the mosquito that spreads most of the dengue fever. On the other hand, if albopictus, which is widespread in southern Europe, also adapts to be able to spread dengue fever as well as other infections such as Zika virus, chikungunya, then we have a problem.
Okay, so the aegypti mosquito doesn't cope with the cold weather, doesn't like the cold weather. That seems to be what you're saying to me is the one that spreads most of dengue. But this tiger mosquito, yes, more resilient and with climate change able to thrive in previously colder climes, which are now getting hotter. Is this something that you are tracking in terms of not only dengue fever, but much more dangerous mosquito-transmitted illnesses, such as malaria, for example?
Well, indeed, but we mustn't disregard how dangerous dengue fever is, because every year we have about 20 to 25,000 deaths from dengue fever. And with dengue fever, we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know, meaning many people are infected and we never know about it because they have a mild illness and then they recover. That is not to also say that mosquito-borne malaria is not a problem. Of course it is. So we have malaria, we have dengue fever, we have to worry about Zika virus, and of course we have to worry about chikungunya, West Nile fever, and of course even including yellow fever. Because remember, Aedes aegypti is a yellow fever transmitting mosquito.
All right, so there's a lot of research that needs to be done specifically around dengue fever, as you've explained. What needs to be done to manage it? Are we looking at more vaccines, environmental controls? What are the frontiers to managing dengue fever?
So it has to be multifactorial, without a doubt, as you say. So there are 2 vaccines, but those vaccines are mainly to be deployed at the moment where there is a lot of dengue fever. So on top of vaccine development, we also need to work on how to control mosquitoes by having pests that kill mosquitoes. So we cannot be forever spraying insecticides, but what we need is research into what is going to kill the mosquito. In other words, other insects to harm the mosquito. And that sort of research is absolutely important and high time that it was done. Of course, there are other preventative measures that we also need to take, which is stagnant water. And we are finding, instead of ships, that it is along motorway routes that these mosquitoes are finding their way into southern Europe and further up north. So, it's like car tires, empty car tires, tires which hold water and things
any
like that.
stagnant patch of water. And so important what you're saying is that much more research is needed, particularly as areas that were not that hot become increasingly warm. Dr. Bharat Pankania, thank you so much. He's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter.